Hello, fellow shut-ins, and thanks for tuning in. Despite COVID-19, this is the Brain Software Podcast, episode 148, coming to you from both the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada, and an hour east in Hypno East, Port Perry, Ontario, Canada. I'm Chris Thompson, and today, Mike Mandel and I talk about the art and science of conversational hypnosis, so stay tuned.
And I turned to the Prime Minister and said, halibut and chips might be all right for you chaps. But what happens when we run out of gin? In any case, in these troubled times, while there's still a winsome vitality in all things British, I cannot say that I was entirely surprised by the news coming out of Texas. But if these American chaps are able to straddle the line between American football and real football, which they call soccer, where we might be able to provide adequate research into Mary Kelly's death and the falsification that can only help us declare from the very heights of the grassy knoll that which we, of all people, really want to know. Just what is that damnable occurrence that since its very inception and the rise of COVID-19 has decimated the last vestige of calm relaxation that in the past we were constantly aware of?
Despite coronavirus, these are still days of victory. Welcome, riders of the hypnotic virus. We're here for you, and you're here for you too.
Hurrah!
And Bono's here for you too. So let's welcome to the very caspid of the hypnotic corona, a man who's unafraid of remaining isolated for a protracted period of time, and we're not talking about prison. A man who actually lives, eats, and breathes in the hypnotic world epicenter.
That's me.
And a man who's currently remote in location, but has a pair of awesome game-worthy headphones, so he doesn't sound like a dick on this podcast. Mike Mandel.
It's Christopher. Brand new headphones. Game-worthy is right, with a built-in mic. I think the quality is sterling.
It is so far. It's so weird not having you right beside me speaking into the other microphone. So hopefully if we're talking at the same time, the audio is reasonable. But we're doing this over Zoom in case everyone's wondering. We're doing this now and recording it over Zoom so we can see each other and hear each other. But sometimes,
we can wave.
And wave to each other. Sometimes the dual channel audio is not amazing. But it's pretty good sound. I'm reasonably happy with Zoom for podcasts.
Well, it's
so that's how we're doing it until we can get together.
Better than not doing podcasts.
Absolutely.
While COVID-19's raging. So, okay, buddy, let's take it away.
Yeah. So we decided that we're going to do a focus topic on conversational hypnosis in this episode. Before we do, though, why don't we introduce anything you want to talk about, and including the think tank words of the day and all that usual stuff?
Yeah. What about cancellations? Things are being canceled.
Oh, man. Yeah. Events are just getting canceled left, right, and center. We've already had to cancel our April Architecture of Hypnosis. June 1 is now off the table because things are just not anywhere back to normal. The UK Hypnosis Convention, we found out just a couple of days ago, has been canceled for November. So it's looking like there are not a whole lot of live events. We don't know about HypnoThoughts Live yet. Hopefully in August it'll be fine, but we don't know.
It's everybody's just doing this sort of day by day, and we're seeing what happens. Everybody's shut in, so what a great time to be recording and listening to podcasts.
Yep, absolutely, and doing online training. So, all right.
I've set up the think tank words here, Chris, so we might as well bring these peckers out.
All right.
So the first one is introspect, actually done with a think tank, not an online word generator. The second one is craniology. Woo-hoo. And the last one is fruition.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to let you just run with it. You just start.
Well, I hadn't even thought about it, but introspect, to me, there's a thoughtfulness. I'm finding a lot of people are under deep introspection right now. I had so many people saying to me they can't even figure out what the point of their life is right now. Just day by day, life is going so quickly, and it's also dragging. Saturdays feel like Mondays. Every day is just weird, and people are doing deep introspection, just trying to figure out how they're going to get through all this. And I think it's important that we fill our lives with things that matter and things that are important at this time. So let's make sure that we're spending time with loved ones. Well, if we can't see them in person, let's do it online. Let's make sure we are getting fresh air. Introspection means let's look at things and make sure the results we're getting in these troubled times are the results we want. What do you think when you get introspection?
I was thinking along the same lines of what you just said. So I'll only add on that I've been currently listening to the book 80-20, the 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. And it's a fantastic book. And if you were to do an 80-20 analysis of the things that you really value in your life, most of those things are still there. With the exception that obviously in some cases, unemployment has skyrocketed. So I totally understand that a lot of people relied on jobs, possibly even jobs they loved that right now they're not able to do. And that definitely sucks. But aside from that, a lot of the stuff that we're in love with doing is still there. Spending time with family, and maybe you can't get in physical contact with your friends, but you can certainly have Zoom meetings and phone calls and FaceTime. All that's still there. You can still get outside and be in nature, obviously, if you're
You better do that, really. Get fresh air.
Yeah. You can still, I'm still working out in my basement, and my workouts are better than ever right now. In fact, you can still eat healthy. You can still watch movies. You can still laugh. You can still read. You can still educate yourself.
Okay, now you've raised some really interesting points here because you're really focusing on what we can do instead of what we can't do. And if people focus on what they're not able to do right now, that's a freaking nightmare. I said to someone, I was on a Fred talk with Freddie Jacquin yesterday, as you know, and we were talking about this very thing, people locked in, not able to do things. And I told them about my friend who's since deceased, Reuben Carter, Hurricane Carter, from the film, the guy they made the film The Hurricane about.
Yeah.
And he was very interesting because I think he did 14 years in prison, almost entirely solitary confinement. And for a man who wanted his freedom and loved his freedom, you'd think that would drive him nuts. But what he did was he just kept scaling back the area that he could control. So when he was in solitary confinement, he didn't think outside the cell. It was just, I'm in control of this space now. I'm in complete control of this space. So maybe introspection should lead us to recognize what we are in control of in our lives, what still we have the final say in, and what we can do, not what we can't do, which leads us to craniology.
Yeah.
How do you plug that in?
Yeah, well, what are you plugging into your head, right? What are you thinking about? I really think about craniology. I assume that means the study of a cranium.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah,
I would assume. If it's not, I'm going to pretend that's exactly what it means. Okay.
Well, that's the advantage of using these things as stepping stones. It's where it takes your mind,
Yeah, so it's all about what is going in and out of your head. What messages are you letting in, and what are you pumping out to the world in your communication?
Excellent. Yep, it's a good point. And I think craniology, to me, thinks the brain. I think of the brain right away. So it's the same thing. What am I putting in my brain during this time? Why not utilize this time for some solid learning? I've got some downtime. I can learn something brand new. Brush up on my French or German or something, or my Russian. Who knows? What about fruition?
Oh, well.
Fruition.
That's a good one, Mike.
When fruit comes to fullness, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, the fruits of our labor. And so, for example, we're in this downtime, sort of downtime. It's not really downtime, but downtime in terms of a lot of the physical things we would be right now. We would actually be teaching the architecture of hypnosis.
I know.
And so we can't do that, but what can we do? Well, we are planning all kinds of cool stuff instead, right? That is going to come to fruition when we can get back together, let's say, to film videos again, courses that we're going to put out, online trainings that we'll do in lieu of live events. And for example, my wife really wanted to repaint the house. So we bought a bunch of paint, and that will come to fruition.
Painted fruit all over your walls.
She will be thrilled when we're done and we have this nicely new, freshly painted main floor of the house, right? So there's things that we can do. I'm still working hard, years and years of fitness training to do certain moves that are almost gymnastic related that they're coming to fruition. Not quite there yet, but I'm working hard.
Let me remind you, Chris, the biological clock is running out for you.
Thanks, buddy.
You're one day closer to death.
Working on press handstands by the time I'm 50.
Yeah, what's going to happen is your normal physical fitness will start to fade as you get closer to being a senior citizen, and all the best intentions will just go right down the tubes. And before long, I'm forecasting here, Chris, I'm having a psychic reading. I can see you sitting on a couch a lot with a lot of beer and giant bags of potato chips.
It sounds like you're doing some introspection on failures in your own life, Mike.
Good one, buddy. Good one. Okay, so let's talk about conversational hypnosis.
Let's move on.
So what the heck is conversational hypnosis? I hear this term is thrown about a bit, but you don't really get much in the way of a definition. But the way you and I see this, Chris, is conversational hypnosis is the creation and utilization and termination of trance states with someone else, with another person or other people, without the formal induction of a hypnosis session. In fact, it can even be done. The weird thing is, my next point is all conversation is hypnosis. Anyway, it's hypnotic.
Well, yeah, that's a really important point. The idea that all conversations are hypnotic, because if we just break it down that we're creating emotions, we are manufacturing emotions and we're directing attention through conversation.
Right. But if someone in the conversation, if it's pure data instead of accessing kinesthetics and all these other things, then perhaps it isn't hypnosis. Yes. In those cases. If you're reading a phone book to someone and they're responding with multiplication tables, seeing that as hypnotic is probably a mistake. But let's say, generally speaking, having a conversation with someone will result in people going in and out of trance states. And that's the key. It's the in and out of it.
Yeah, you've raised an interesting point that it depends on the conversation. Obviously, if it's simply reading numbers at somebody, punch these numbers into a calculator for me, will you, Mike? 32. Okay.
Oh, I can't. I'm in a trance.
That could create a boring trance, I suppose. But, if you were just following some robotic pattern, eventually in your head, you're going to think about something else, and that's going to drive you into trance, but the conversation won't. So as long as the conversation involves some level of emotions, it's likely to generate hypnotic phenomena.
Or let's say some level of kinesthesis.
Yes.
Some kinesthetic response beyond pure visual or pure auditory, whatever. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a hypnotic aspect to it. And I think it's important, too, to realize that although the naturally occurring trances in conversation will sort of ebb and flow like waves on a beach, the trance people go in and out as they consider what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Conversational hypnosis that is intentional is much more likely to cause a more robust trance that's going to be maintained for a longer period of time instead of just sort of going through these feeling states.
Yeah,
does that make any sense?
That if you just have a conversation without the intention of doing conversational hypnosis, people will go in and out of trance as they engage with parts of the story and then come back to now and change the topic. But if you go into a conversation with the intention of it being hypnotic, you'll drive someone into a much deeper state. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I also want to raise this point that just because it's called conversational hypnosis, it doesn't imply that you are or are not disclosing or discussing the fact that you're doing hypnosis with somebody. So you can do conversational hypnosis over Zoom or in a live office setting with a client who has come there and paid you to hypnotize them to solve some sort of problem. Or you can do it undisclosed, just in ordinary conversation which
then becomes covert hypnosis.
Right, and that's what the difference is between conversational hypnosis and covert hypnosis is a subset of conversational hypnosis.
Right. Now, that's really interesting, Chris, because you've raised something that I saw over the last few nights. Heather and I didn't watch TV for years, but we've got Netflix now with our brand new TV and a brand new Blu-ray player.
You're so thrilled with that.
Finally cacked in. Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Because I've really enjoyed a couple of series. I like some of the true crime ones, but what I find particularly interesting, have you ever seen Mad Men?
Yes.
Okay,
the
so
advertising. Very popular.
Don Draper, the character, when he does a sales pitch to his clients, since he's the head of creative for the ad agency, it is so unbelievably hypnotic. I said to Heather, the writing here is phenomenal.
Yeah.
He'll talk about, we cut to a scene, a woman sitting in a cabin and her children are playing at her feet. There's a cozy fire burning. She takes a piece of bread, puts it in the toaster. The music starts playing as she spreads butter upon. And as he builds this scene, to sell margarine or whatever, you can see everyone being drawn into this hypnotic loop. And he's engaging very, very pleasant emotions that are tied to the product. In this case, margarine, just the coziness, the feeling of family, the warm toast, the comfort food.
Mm-hmm.
My mouth is freaking watering as I'm talking about this.
That's hilarious.
I don't even eat that stuff. But that would be an example of persuasion through covert conversational hypnosis.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
As you said earlier, he's bringing in the emotions, and that's what's going to make the difference, isn't it?
I think you're completely bang on with that. I love it.
Well, I'm right, so I'm glad to hear that you agree, because I am correct.
Yeah, it pains me to say that, but I do. I agree. No.
Shut up, you idiot.
Okay, so let's talk about Milton Erickson and why is it that Milton H. Erickson was so well known and is well regarded as essentially being the father of conversational hypnosis?
Well, I think it's arguable from his research and superb documentation of what he found, plus the fact that he was a psychoanalyst, a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, the fact that he documented everything so perfectly. Erickson is arguably the greatest hypnotist who ever lived as a researcher and as a practitioner. John Grinder told me that I said, why did you spend 3-day sessions with Erickson, you and Bandler, when you were researching him and deconstructing as a linguist his language systems? And he said it was the longest you could stay in his presence, because I thought he'd stay for a few weeks and study, but he said, no, you're going in and out of trance constantly with him. He said Erickson was on pretty well all the time. He had a tremendous sense of humor. But I think it's intriguing that Erickson himself said that in his early days, he was far too directive. So you watch videos of him in the early days when he's getting hand levitation and so on, and it was much more towards the directive paternal end of the hypnotic scale. Over time, he learned how to interact with someone conversationally and observe, superb calibration, putting people in and out of trances. And this is when he would do his magic. For example, remember I said, we talked about this before, psychiatrists would come and watch him work, sit in his office, and he'd have patients coming in one after another, and he'd be doing magic. He'd just be talking to them, and they'd be getting fixed or cured, or however you want to put it. And because no one like Jay Haley or Bandler and Grinder had come along yet and deconstructed the language patterns he was using, it just seemed impossible to them. And so I think we can arguably say, or we can argue convincingly, that Erickson was not only the father of conversational hypnosis, but probably the best at it of anybody who ever lived.
Yep. I think there's nobody I could think of who'd be better than Erickson was.
So I know there's been some great work done in recent years by people like our friend and colleague Igor Ledohovsky, who has made a real concerted effort to produce a system of conversational hypnosis that's very well put together, quite profound. But if people want to practice this, there's going to be certain components that everybody's going to have to learn. Yeah. And one way to do this is to read Erickson himself, like read his own stuff, read his works. I love some of the stuff that Rossi and Erickson did together, where the language is deconstructed and so on. And we start to see the patterns are very, very clever, how he is refocusing another person's attention. And by doing that and creating these states, as Richard Hill does so well, creating states of curiosity, and curiosity opens the sensory channels wide. When we get a client curious and begin asking questions and wondering, it causes immense internal shifts that can easily be cascaded into hypnotic states.
You raised the idea of capturing attention, and that reminds me of marketing and copywriting. And in fact, we put this in the notes here. We had a conversation earlier this week about this. Copywriting is generally, in my opinion, is conversational hypnosis that happens in the form of writing. It's just written form of conversational hypnosis. So if you're writing a so-called sales letter to somebody, there's an old formula called AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. And that, to me, is the same principle as would be used in conversational hypnosis. You must capture somebody's attention and maintain their interest, and then through emotion build their desire and ultimately give them a hypnotic suggestion, which is a call to action in the case of marketing.
That's a good point. Very good point. I've never heard of that. I wondered if you had said it unconsciously because I'm such an opera buff and my opera tickets are canceled right now. But Aida is a great opera. It's, huge and expressive and massive on stage. But I can't see it now. So anyway,
all right.
You're telling me about attention and that. I'm drifting away into opera, which showed that even you explaining that to me about copywriting sort of put me in a bit of a trance.
Isn't that interesting?
I was back at the Four Seasons Center for the Performing Arts in Toronto. That's amazing.
All right. So now we're going to break down the components of all of this, right?
Okay. Well, let's just touch on something else here. I'm asking for your verification on this quite seriously because you are an Enneagram 9. And 9s are the natural rapport builders. People generally like them. But 9s have another interesting trait. I don't know if this is across the board, and you're sort of an unusual 9. So I'm going to ask you if this applies to you. Hey, this applies to you. Yeah, not saying anything wrong with it. The whole concept of parallel processing. When you're talking to a 9, like our friends Paul or Sebastian, you can see them glaze over and they're parallel processing. You've sent them off somewhere else with it. Mm-hmm. And is that something you experience? Do you sort of trance out very, very quickly and you're monitoring the conversation, but at the same time, you're sort of drifting off somewhere else?
Well, yeah, although I'm not sure if I would call it parallel processing. More so, I'll catch myself just failing to process the primary conversation because I'm so caught up in whatever's going on in my head all of a sudden that I've now lost the main train of thought. And so it could be my kids or my wife telling me something and I've completely lost what they're saying. And
so
I'll be unconsciously saying, yep, sure, no problem. And I don't remember any of it later.
Yeah, in reality, you're going,
Yeah.
Are you going into conversational hypnosis when that happens?
Yeah, I guess I must be very easily guided into some internal state, internal focused attention based on the trigger from what somebody else said to me in a conversation. It triggered me to go inside very quickly and start processing something else.
Which, of course, is NLP downtime.
Yeah.
Downtime is going inside for the processing. Uptime keeps us external in sensory-based information. So where do you feel that when you drift into that now?
Oh, it's like, right. You know what?
I think I was doing parallel processing on you.
When you ask questions like that, it drives me right into it.
Right. And where does it happen?
Right in the front of the head. Yeah.
So what is this good for? I mean, what is the point of conversational hypnosis?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people think about let's actually bring this up really quickly. So I think a lot of people have this idea that conversational hypnosis, if they get really good at it, they're going to get people to forget their names and stuff like that just through conversation. And maybe sometimes if that's your real intention, but that's not what it's really used for. In my opinion, it can be so elegant as a way to unlock creativity, find new opportunities, to get past problems, to reframe situations in your life.
Right. Now you just brought up some really good stuff there. And let me just give an example here. You said unlock creativity. So if I'm sitting across from someone and, they've got writer's block or something, they used to write really well. I worked with a guy in Brittany, France over Skype and unlocked his writer's block. In that case, it was mindscaping, but it could just as easily have been done by saying, when you think back to all those wonderful times when the words just flowed and that part of your mind could track at a deep unconscious level, not only the room you were in and what you were putting on paper, but the thoughts themselves that would bubble to the surface and enable you to find that creativity, recognizing full well that you still have it and can access it now. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, and in my head, as I'm looking to complete your sentences, right, that you're going to now shift into discussion about how the person felt so motivated and enjoyed the process.
I mean, really enjoyed it.
And then, of course, we'll get to some of the techniques, but embedding commands becomes an obvious opportunity in that conversation. And it can sound weird. So let's actually talk about that really quickly, too. How weird does conversational hypnosis sound? Is it a spectrum? Is it always weird, or is it undetectable, Mike?
Well, we can both think of examples that we have joked about, and I'm not going to say them because I don't want to mock anybody, but we can think of examples that are very, very odd sounding.
Yes.
And not just because of the content, but the delivery can sound nuts. I had a guy phone me up once who wanted to take my master hypnosis
I remember
course.
this story.
Remember this guy? Yeah, this isn't the one I was just thinking of, but he phoned up and he wanted to convince me he had great hypnotic skills and could go directly into the master course. And it was, and when you discover at a deep level, you are going to help me learn hypnosis from you, and you'll discover that I can master all of it. He sounded insane. And that was him doing Tad James, doing Richard Bandler, and doing Erickson. And every level, it had become more and more warped and bizarre sounding. You don't have to sound like a lunatic when you use this stuff.
That's exactly what I was hoping you would go into, because I think it's a spectrum, and it really depends on whether this is covert and just an ordinary conversation, or whether it's framed as hypnosis to the person, in which case it's much more acceptable to go a little bit more into the weird sounding
right
spectrum, I'll say.
The weird sounding end of the spectrum.
Yeah, the weird. Yeah, I haven't had enough coffee yet today. The weird end of the spectrum can get really freaking weird if people do it badly, and they're just, and imagine if we're just sitting in a pub and I start looking at you and talking to you about the glass of wine that you're having. And Mike, have you ever thought about just how flavorful it can be now to enjoy that glass of wine?
You sound like I'd be going, what's the matter with you?
I've gone mental.
You don't have to sound like a lunatic.
Yeah.
And we're at our first point of the techniques here. This fits perfectly now, Chris, which is rapport and pacing.
Mm-hmm.
I've said to my students, our students, many, many times, that rapport is the glue that holds trance together.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. You lose
rapport, you lose your subject.
So, yeah, if you act too freaking weird, rapport out the window. Whereas, so as I was just describing a situation with you, let's say across the table at a restaurant with a glass of wine, and I start talking bizarro, no rapport. But if you've come to me to help you with confidence, and now I slow down my speech and I say, and it's easy for you to just allow your eyes to close now. That's right.
Right.
And find a time in your personal history when you were so aware of a sense of confidence in exactly doing the right thing. And all of a sudden, it's okay here, right? That's not unusual at all, because the framing is hypnosis for helping you.
Yeah, for sure it is. That's perfect. And backing up to the rapport point for a second. So you've given it a context where it's useful, and that will maintain the rapport. My first NLP trainer, Chris Dunkley, in 1992-93, we were doing some basic timeline work with people, and he brought up a point I've never heard anybody else say. You can make all of these amazing timeline shifts with someone to change the quality of their life, erase phobias, problems, whatever. But if you don't have rapport with the person, when you do it, it will revert later.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So it's not only the glue that holds the trance together, but I would also posit that rapport is the glue that maintains the change even after you've disengaged from the person.
So it's the glue that holds trance together, and that keeps the change in place.
See, this is why they pay me the big bucks, Chris. Lines like that,
Yeah, that's nice.
Well, actually, since you're the one who pays me,
really interesting. So, and of course, the concept here of calibration is so fundamental, not just to hypnosis, but every human interaction. If you don't calibrate and have rapport, if you don't notice, and that was our next point, is calibration. But if you don't notice that you've lost rapport, you're wasting your time with everything else that you do beyond that.
Yes. And someone very close to me, I can think of a couple of times. I'm not going to say it was my wife. I won't say that at all. But there were people we had meetings with. I can think of two specific meetings without going into the details. She broke rapport by accident and didn't notice, because in both cases, the meeting was over and she didn't notice the meeting was over and just kept going with it. Points.
Yeah.
And I could sense the frustration with the other person, right? Like we've shut this box. It's closed. This is dealt with. Yeah. Why are we opening it and starting again like a brand new thing,
Yeah.
So you must calibrate. Calibration. John Grinder over lunch. Yes, I had lunch with John Grinder and supper. But years ago, he and I had lunch at a hotel in Toronto, and he said he wanted to pick my brains about some of my ideas, and I was totally interested in anything he had to say. And still the best teacher I ever had. And he asked me what the four most important, this one, Chris, for sure. The four most important components of NLP were. The most important. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, meta model, because you have to be able to elicit a response and get information. Rapport, the glue that holds it all together. Congruence, because if you're not congruent, if you're offhand, the changes won't last. You won't have any power behind it. And calibration, because if you're not calibrating, you won't even notice that they've made the changes. So we gave remember the acronym,
Yes.
Mr. CC is the
Mr. CC, because at the time, the workout that we were both very much into was called combat conditioning from Matt Fury. So we said Mr. CC.
Yeah, that's right. And he said it was completely correct. And notice, though, the importance of calibration in that. So in any kind of hypnosis, whether it is conversational or otherwise, you must calibrate, because you've got to be able to see that you're getting a response from someone. I've said many times, I watched a hypnosis trainer from another school hypnotizing someone, and she put the person into trance and brought them out 4 times, and she was still doing her induction. But because she wasn't looking at the person and calibrating, she was creating these profound trances, losing the rapport, and having the person come out again, and just kept going. So calibrate. Remember I said Derek Balmer said, you can't see what you can't see, which is a tautology. What he meant was you can't see what you're not looking for.
Right.
So look at the person, listen to the person, and calibrate. And that brings us to the Mandel triangle.
All right. So let's get through this list, because we've got quite a lot of stuff that we want to talk about. And I have no idea how long we've been recording at this point.
Well, I do actually, Chris. We've been going about 25 minutes.
There you go. This is going to be
I think this is going to be a 2-podcast one.
It might.
It definitely is, because we have a lot of examples here. So let's go into Mandel triangle. Rather than doing one and trying to get through everything quickly, let's do 2 and do it in depth.
Sure. Okay. So we've decided on the fly. This is a 2-parter on conversational hypnosis.
Yes. So let's look at
we'll probably cover more of the techniques later, but this is a bit more principle based than in
it is.
One.
So so our guy Ross, who's listening now, he did that amazing diagram of the Mandel triangle, didn't he?
Yeah, he created that artwork for us in a blog post, which we'll link to in the show notes, so we won't have to worry about giving a URL here. But just so you know, if you want the show notes for our podcasts, they're now very simple to find. It's MikeMandelHypnosis.com / whatever the episode number is. So this will be MikeMandelHypnosis.com / 148, because this is episode 148.
Nice and simple. Well, Ross made this great diagram of the Mandel triangle. And when people understand the simple concept, it is literally a game changer. The center of the triangle has a C, which of course is
calibration.
Calibration. You got to calibrate.
It is not caligiono. It is calibration.
No, it's definitely not caligiono.
Yeah.
So you've got to see what the person is offering you. You've got to notice their analog behavior coming back to you. But then there's congruence. Each of the sides of this equilateral triangle, if you enlarge any one of them, the triangle enlarges. The others will improve as well. So if you increase your congruence, your ability to send one consistent message, you'll get a very powerful effect with the person you're dealing with, whether it's just a conversation or whether it's hypnosis or NLP or you're doing a keynote or whatever. Being congruent means your body language, all your internal systems, your internal monologue, all of these things are sending one consistent message. We can hear incongruence right away with things like, well, what do you think of our new house? Oh, it's nice. But we hear the ellipsis at the end of the sentence, the dot.
You can see congruence as well. So if somebody claims they are ready to listen to something that you have to say, but they're staring at their iPhone 11 Pro Max, let's say, in this case. Mike and I always use the exact model number, of course, which is going to sound absurd in 5 years when that's an obsolete phone. But if somebody's saying, yeah, go ahead, tell me that interesting story you wanted to tell me, Chris, and I open my mouth to start speaking and I see person's on phone or glancing at, no, sorry, congruence lost. You're not actually that interested.
Yeah. I want someone looking at me when I'm talking.
Yeah.
I really do. So the second one is confidence. If you increase your congruence, your confidence will go up automatically because congruent people are confident. The more confident you are, the more the other person will trust you and feel that you have a sense of empowerment as well.
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing. We naturally, as human beings, gravitate towards people who are confident.
Yeah.
Because people who are not confident, you know what they do, Chris? Maybe you never thought of this. People who are not confident trigger our needy detector.
How sure are you of that?
Very good.
They do come across as needy. You're right.
We don't want people to seem needy.
Let's actually jump into this right now, because I was thinking about confidence in terms of, I mentioned earlier marketing, right? Well, if somebody is presenting an offer to you and they say, I think you're really going to like this. It doesn't really sound that confident. It sounds almost needy. Like, I really need you to buy this from me, please. But if you say,
in fact,
I have something that you are going to love. You are going to so love this, Mike. That's confident.
And the congruence of the confidence come across. And any agent, I've talked to my agent about this before, and it's very interesting. The people who don't get the gigs are the ones who are always phoning and please, I'm out of money and I've got to have, can you get me something next week? They just push them aside because it triggers the needy detector, and
That's
hate the needy detector.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Needy at one end of the spectrum, confident at the other. And confident says, I can go it alone. I don't need you. I'm fine by myself.
Yeah,
but you're going to want to be around me because I'm confident.
It's the self-reliance, and people who are self-reliant underline their signature with a single left to right stroke. It's a powerful trait. Let's go to the last one. Then we have to take a quick commercial break.
Intention.
But the last one, intention.
Okay. This is a bit of a weird one, right? And intention.
A little woo-woo.
We used to call it Conviction. Actually, no, we always called it intention.
Always called it intention.
We
started
switched it
saying
to conviction
conviction
because we wanted to have 3 C's.
Well, 4 if you count calibration.
Yeah, with the calibration. But I just prefer intention. So who cares? I'll alliterate.
Maybe we'll start calling it conviction/intention. That way we got them both. But conviction, there's something weird about it. It's our most woo-woo thing. And a little bit woo, a little bit woo.
It's more of an internal state that you are in as you're delivering, right? You are intending internally, and that comes out in your confidence and your congruence.
I expect so. But then again, you could say your congruence is then coming out in your confidence and your intention.
Yeah, that's why it's a triangle, right?
Yeah, but to me, intention it was like Marquis de Puysegur when they asked him, the French Freemasons in Paris, how he could hypnotize pretty well anybody. He said he makes an internal representation, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, of this working. And then he believes it's going to work.
Yeah.
And then he intends for it to work.
Yeah.
It's like he's delivering willpower behind it or something. Intention changes everything. I don't know how it does.
And I think that speaks a lot to being in the right state for whatever it is that you are doing.
That's it, Chris. For whatever it is you are doing. That's right. The proper state. I think we have to now take a commercial break.
All right. So here is a word from our sponsor.
There's a sausage in the frying pan, but the stove has run out of gas. The bottle's out of Windex and the streaks upon the glass. Your kids go to reform school and you don't think that they'll pass, 'cause your wife left with the guy next door who's sweaty and he's crass. If you only find your wallet, you can grab a bite to eat, but your shoes are wet and sweaty and there's fungus on your feet. Your undershirt turned yellow and the dogs all stay away. And your saxophone is rusty and you never learn to play. So I say, Jerry, 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 why not cash in those beer bottles and food stamps and take the refund and head down to that small specialty shop across from the co-op behind the filling station on the other side of the tracks next to the biker bar where nobody will ever see you, and sneak up that long flight of stairs and pick up a smooth one for yourself.
Jerry and the Smooth One, tonight at 11:22 on the Grassy Knoll Network.
I think maybe the final point here, Chris, for this one, because we're running out of time, is the concept of pacing, not pacing the other person's behavior rapport-wise, but pacing yourself to go slower and slower. Now, I don't mean speaking at a freaking funeral dirge level, but I mean, if we're talking sort of in an animated fashion like this, although you can certainly do conversational hypnosis if you're talking like this, I think it's better when you begin to engage the person's attention and start to slow down a little bit. And the reason why is these deep kinesthetic states, they need time to develop.
Okay, so because I want to make sure that the people listening to this episode get some value in terms of understanding how to apply this,
right?
Let me challenge you to come up with a simple example of theoretically you are having a conversation and you're slowing down, and what is it that you're saying, and what is your purpose? And I want to just, before I get you to answer, I want to frame that the slowing down is an opportunity for you as the speaker to also have more ability to calibrate, right? You can continue to monitor just how much the other person's in rapport with you, whether they're responding to what you're saying, whether their blink reflex shuts down, what their breathing rate is, how they're holding their body, all these things. When you speak slower, you have an opportunity to spend more time calibrating. Now,
and you have an opportunity for more intentionality with it.
Yes.
You're not talking in an offhand way about, this trip you took or something. You're now drawing the life lessons out of it, making it hypnotic.
Yeah. So okay, here I'll give you the context that I want you to use. Let's talk about, for example, the UK Hypnosis Convention that was just canceled in November. And, I'm disappointed about something going on in my own life. And you're going to now use the fact that the UK Hypnosis Convention that was canceled, or conference, and you're going to use that to reframe how this is an opportunity to focus on other things. And there'll always be another event next year.
Okay. Well, this is off the top of my head, as you know.
Okay.
So yeah, Chris, I got the letter and I got the email rather, and I understand the UK Hypnosis Conference has been canceled this year. And as you can imagine, I was looking forward to presenting. And when I started to think about this, I honestly began to feel a deep sense of disappointment. So many of our friends are there. So many people that I care about are in that setting, and so many fabulous trainers I wanted to learn from. I mean, really learn from. And I thought about disappointment. And it's an interesting term because the opposite of disappointment is appointment. And I started wondering, what kind of appointments can I put there instead? What kind of new ways can I drop information into that time frame? So rather than being something that you miss, you determined that you can appoint new ways of doing things and say, what can I draw from this so that when it's running again, really up and running well in 2021, perhaps, my new appointment for them will be truly life-changing. And you can change so many things when you think ahead like that. Why to wait now?
Oh, love it. That was a great example. Okay, so let's
Thanks, buddy.
quickly deconstruct then. You slowed down. You spoke with intention. You made that up on the fly. We didn't plan this in advance in any way, shape, or form. But that's just natural. That's just you. So what did you really do there by slowing down? And in part 2, obviously, we can deconstruct this more and speak to the specifics.
And speak about the specifics. That's right. I was calibrating you, looking at the video, and began to nod as I saw you nod. So I'm increasing the rapport loop. And I began to emphasize the nominalization of disappointment. And by emphasizing it, by saying it slowly and with deliberation, but not disappointment, sounding weird, I'm accessing that word's meaning to you. Times in the past, you've been disappointed. Then I start to reframe by dropping the dis from it, turning it into an appointment. And if I'd gone on, I would have said things like, we never know until we follow the threads backward. When something was an appointment with destiny, those moments that can change everything. And
that's beautiful.
Keep going with it.
Yeah, I think it's important because, so let's say, and we didn't really do a proper full on, what's the word, like when two people role play, we didn't do a really full on role play. I didn't do my part. But if I had presented some disappointment, I'm really disappointed about X. And then Mike, you come in and now you're building rapport by acknowledging my starting point. My starting emotional state is one of disappointment. I'm disappointed with something that's going on, right?
Yeah. And I would be offering back your language, your very words. If you'd say, I'm feeling a real sense of disappointment, I'd say, yes, a sense of disappointment. I wouldn't say, yes, you're feeling kind of sad. No, I'd use your exact words to build
And you build rapport by then bringing in a similar situation where you were also disappointed. And then you drew in more emotion and then started to transform that emotion into something else, something more positive. And you made sure that I was engaged with what was happening in the conversation. You slowed down and you guided me to a place that was much more optimistic.
Yes, or at least more resourceful.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of accessing resources, which is the real key here.
Phenomenal.
Which brings us, Chris, to the resource of the empowering questions for today.
I'm very happy with how this podcast has gone so far.
Yeah, the next one's going to be even better.
Yes. All right. So go ahead and let's do the empowering question. You want me to read it or you?
Oh, you always do.
All right, I'll do it. Here we go. So ask yourself, how will I remember to notice the hypnotic shifts that are occurring in people as I speak with them? And what will I begin to do today to be more hypnotic when I talk? So I'll say that again.
Nice.
Ask yourself, how will I remember to notice the hypnotic shifts that are already occurring in people as I speak with them? And what will I do today to be more hypnotic when I talk?
Okay, I have to say that you threw in some really nice embedded stuff there,
yes,
just off the top of your head.
Which we're going to get to.
You've come a long way, man, in 12 years with your embedded commands.
I used to furrow my brows. Although I can't wait till we talk about this on the next podcast on part 2. But yeah.
Well, let me now bring you to the Meta 5 for today, which I call it the profound auditory memory.
Yeah.
When I began studying NLP, I thought that I was a visual, but I'm not. I'm a primary auditory processor, meaning sounds affect me more than anything. That's my usual point of entry into emotions. What I hear will affect my emotions. But what happened as a result of this was I developed this ridiculous auditory memory for music, right brain stuff. So often I would hear something just once and remember it even decades later, provided it was music, even with the context of how I heard it and so on. It's bizarre. When Denise Grant, my photographer before, when she was doing photographs for me, she had some CDs playing in the background, the days of CDs, and it was all TV themes from the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And within 2 seconds, I could identify the show over and over. She said, this is insanity, this is insanity. But here's where this gets weird, Chris. One day, my wife and I were in our kitchen, and this goes back to last week. My wife and I were in the kitchen, and this 10 years ago or so, and then the last week connection comes in at the end of this. But 10 years ago, we're in the kitchen. Some music was playing on the radio, the FM station, 96.3. And I said to her, I heard that before, over 50 years ago. I heard it playing. I was home sick from school with flu or something, grade 6. And I watched the TV show. It was a movie on black and white TV called The Pied Piper. I said, they used this music in that. And I sang the words that were in it. She said, no way. At the end of the thing, the guy said, oh, that was by, Bizet or whatever. And it was noteworthy. It was used in the children's film, The Pied Piper, filmed in 1960. She couldn't believe it. I said, God is my witness. I've not heard that music in over 50 years. So fast forward to last week, talking to Brian McDowell, who I've known forever. And we got talking on the phone. He's in isolation too, obviously. And I explained to him, we got talking about my memory. And I told him about that very story, the music from The Pied Piper. And we sort of changed the subject. And I said, remember we saw Ian and Sylvia, the Folkies? He said, oh, yeah, that was at CFTO TV when we were in grade 8 or something. My dad took us for the taping of a TV show, and they sang. And I said, yeah, it was kind of cool. He said, oh, I remember that guy David Ray sang too. And I said, yeah, here's what he sang. Instantly sang back the song this guy sang. Brian said, that's insane. He said, I learned that song. I liked it so much. I've not talked to you about this since we were 13. You remember it from hearing it once. And I said, yeah. So we hang up the phone. I come downstairs and tell my wife about Brian McDowell and me remembering David Ray's song. Walk into the kitchen, Chris. 96.3 is playing, and it's the music from The Pied Piper. 5 minutes after I told him, there it was again, 50 years later. Insane. I said to Heather, playing right now.
That is totally bizarre, Mike. I love it. Listen, thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening to our rarely remote, but more common now, Brain Software Podcast, episode 148, part 1 of Conversational Hypnosis. What's coming up in part 2 that you're going to love? There's so much more. We're going to be talking about entering hypnotic loops. We're going to be talking about the power of wondering, presenting options. We'll be talking to you about how to generate run-on sentences, how to tell stories and craft metaphors, the power of nested loops,
embedded commands,
disengagements, nominalizations, and all kinds of more stuff. So speaking of more stuff, let me offer you a free course we have a course called NUVI, Nominalization Unspecified Verb Induction, NUVI. If you head on over to our website, in fact, you can find this on our homepage, I believe, MikeMandelHypnosis.com. But if you want the easier way, go straight to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/NUVI-course. So that's NUVI-course. And you will be able to sign up for free for our 45-minute course on how to speak in Ericksonian conversational language. You'll love this course. It's completely free. And with that, you'll hear us all, you'll hear both of us, on the next podcast, part 2 of Conversational Hypnosis, coming up in episode 149. Thanks, and good night!
Mr. Thompson, I ever tell you how wonderful it was when Henry Squatter finally got married?
No, tell me this one. I haven't heard this.
Well, it was wonderful. He came in one day and the chaps were sitting about. We were having a bonfire. It was kind of a calm night in the trenches. There's not been much shelling for some time. There wasn't much of a bonfire, really. There's more some crumpled up brown paper soaked in vinegar. And I was sitting around it pretending to be warm. And just then Squatter rolled up and he said, "I say, chaps," he said, I'm getting married. And Bryce Morgan perked up immediately, seeing an opportunity for his usual deviltry. He said, "You're getting married, Squatter?" He said, "Yes, I am, Bryce Morgan. A lovely, lovely woman. She's in London. We've sorted it all out through the post." He said, "Well, have you ever had any sort of intimacy with her?" He said, "How dare you, Bryce Morgan? You can't ask me something like that." He said, "Well, I'm just looking after you, old boy." He said, "You should have some experience before you get married." He said, "Well, how am I going to do that?" He said, "Look, you know those assignations I've had with Lady Melbury?" And everyone perked up at this because you're a glamorous woman. Lovely. She was in her early 40s by now, but she looked like she was 25. Very beautiful, dark hair, finely turned ankle. Lovely woman. She used to creep out to Bryce Morgan's hut. Well, not much of a hut, really. More a brick structure with wonderful insulation and a real working fireplace and lots of brandy. And she'd be there for about 20 minutes, and we'd hear this tremendous shout of sexual triumph from Bryce Morgan, and then she'd creep out again. And he said, "Yes, I know, but Lady Melbury, what about her?" He said, I can arrange for her to come round to your hut and teach you how to do a proper seeing to." He said, "Oh, Bryce Morgan, how dare you?" And then but he was very interested. He said, "Are you really?" He said, "Yes, I'll set it up for next Tuesday, the day I normally see her. Wait in your hut." He said, "I recommend you have some brandy to calm your nerves." He said, "Yes, I certainly will. I'll need that." And so Tuesday rolled around, but what he didn't know was Bryce Morgan had put laudanum, camphorated tincture of opium, in his bottle of brandy in his room. And Squatter in preparation, as meant to say, had 6 or 7 glasses of brandy. Bryce Morgan waited for an hour. Lady Melbury, of course, knew nothing of it. And he showed up, burst into Squatter's hut. And he brought the camp photographer with him and all the chaps. And Squatter was passed out on his bed, stark naked, waiting for Lady Melbury. And funny thing is, he was wearing an Alice. He rolled an Alice on and totally passed out. And we put it in the regimental newspaper. Yeah, funniest damn thing. He never got over the humiliation. We called him Alice Squatter after that.